Hey Adam,
Hi, how are you, John?
good, good. I'm glad we reunited. How are you?
I'm doing well. Still running out and about, and yeah, I mean, I'm no longer a student athlete anymore, but I make sure to go out and get a 30-minute run in and whatnot, just to stay in shape, and of course, just to continue this journey with the hyper
Great,
because I think I'd consider myself in between stage two, stage three. So um, I'm definitely in an exciting portion of getting close to stage three and then eventually stage four. So yeah, it's definitely exciting.
great, man. So the reason I want to talk to you because you had a very interesting journey, and the things that you tried just blow my mind because I don't think I met anyone tried as many things to address the running problem as you. So can you tell me a little bit about the particular issue that you had?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was a runner for 7 years, four of which were as a Division One athlete, and I actually took some notes, and it's kind of overwhelming writing down everything that all the injuries I've experienced and the people I've had to reach out to, the doctors that have gotten involved, the amount of times I was in the athletic trainer's room and had to sit out from competition. Yeah, it's definitely it's frustrating to see it all on paper, but yeah, I guess I'll just start by saying that my main events, and when I was a cross country and track and field athlete, my main events in track were the mile and 800, which is roughly half a mile. So I was considered a middle distance runner, and then I was basically a year-round athlete because I did cross country too, and you got to train over the summer. There's like a lot of base work you have to do there. It can get up to 80, 90-mile weeks. And let me just say, let me start off by saying I wish I knew about your program when I was a runner in high school. It would have made a huge difference. I saw
Mhm.
your channel has been around since 2013, and that's actually when I joined the cross country team at my high school. And I definitely encountered your channel because of the YouTube algorithm. I guess at that point, I was searching for so many videos related to running biomechanics and injuries that it was a matter of time before I finally found out your program. I believe this was around the end of 2018 during my junior year of college.
Mhm.
So I was watching your videos before I bought your book, and I was really happy I did buy it because the amount of books I've collected, the injuries I've faced, and doctors I've seen for all my injuries over the past 6 to 7 years, it's, like I said, overwhelming. And your program, out of everything I've seen and read and just been through, it takes such a unique approach on the connection between the feet and the glutes. And I instantly knew all the information I was absorbing for months, that was not the answer, and that you had the answer. There are a lot of
Mm.
fitness gurus out there promoting their plans and whatnot. And I guess up to that point, I was starting to view other people's routines as opinions, and even the experts. I was starting to view physical therapists, chiropractors, athletic trainers. I was starting to look at their routines as just band-aid fixes, as just opinions. And that was before I even knew about your program. That's how much information I was absorbing. But I started to really realize that they weren't really aligning to my individual needs. I was still constantly injured, even facing the same injury I've had that I thought I would solve. And a lot of them were overused, so they weren't really serious, but it was just enough for me to have to um, take it back a little bit and not fully commit to my training programs. And uh, yeah, I know band-aid fixes aren't really the answer. So right before I saw your program, I did know that glute activation was the key to success. I actually had no idea that the feet were involved. I had no idea the ankle was supposed to lock, and I had no idea the anterior tibial tendon, right? That's what it's called,
Mhm.
was supposed to be prominent. Actually,
Right.
if someone showed me a picture of that, I would have said that looks weird because you have the Achilles in the back of your ankle, and then you have that tendon popping up too. I've never really seen an ankle like that before. At least my own ankles, and of course those that I'm around. It wasn't really something I've noticed, but it's now something I can't stop noticing, and the athletes that are doing a lot better. In fact, I guess a lot of runners know that doing core is essential, but we spend our time targeting the abs that give us, I guess, a six-pack appearance, if you will, rather than targeting deep core muscles and all that. Now, I had no idea that was done starting from the feet and involving the glutes, and eventually that would reach the abs. So, yeah, I'll just talk about the list of injuries I've had, which I don't think I've got all of them, but this is definitely a start. I think the first ever thing I've ever had was a foot sprain. I forgot which foot it was, but at the time it was in high school, and the trainer said it was because of the shoes I was wearing. And it was, I think it was a Nike Freeze or something. Because I didn't know any better. I just joined the team, and I was just wearing whatever I could get my hands on, and didn't really think anything of it. I just figured, the only way to get good at running is to just continue to run. And sometimes that's the case, but you may not fully reach your maximum potential. You'll have a lot of injuries depending on your current state, and that's kind of what I've suffered through the years. And so I agreed with the trainer. Said, yeah, these shoes aren't the best. They're definitely worn out. I probably use them for months. And posterior shin inflammation, which sometimes I refer to as shin splints, even though it's kind of in the interior of the ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And this would alternate on both my legs. This would basically plague me through my entire college career until I started doing actually the hyper arc hop. And this is how I really started to buy into your program, because for my 4 years of Division I running, well, actually, I knew about your program junior year, I think. So when I got to my junior year. But my first couple of years, I've had this issue, and it was like my left leg and my right leg, they were taking turns, basically being in pain. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because I would fix the pain in one leg, which would last weeks. I would get it to stop. And then a week later, now the left leg would hurt.
How does that feel? How does that feel? And then when you run with it, how does it feel?
It's definitely painful. It's an overuse injury, but it can become a sharp pain. And I'm surprised that it's become so sharp that it's never really became a stress fracture. I've had friends that they would probably complain about pain in the same area. They would have it for a couple days, and then they have to get an MRI, and then stress fracture or stress reaction. And for some reason, it never got that bad for me, but it was definitely painful to the point where I did have to take a few weeks off. I did have to redshirt my sophomore year cross-country season. And it was in that time, in that moment, I was trying to figure out, like, I can't believe an injury this small is really affecting my entire season. So that was one of the key injuries I've had, where when I started just doing the hyper arc hop alone, and I was doing this on my own, this was just based off what I saw in the YouTube video. This is actually without your guidance. It made such a huge difference. I know from the surface, someone watching videos may say, okay, he looks like he's just doing plyometrics. And I do know what plyometrics are, but I've never implemented it in my routine. But it was different when I started putting the tension in my feet, focusing on that tendon that pops out, the anterior tibial tendon. It made a difference. It was definitely hard at first. Of course, my calves did get really tight in the beginning. I didn't really feel anything for the first week or so, but I guess staying consistent, just doing that 1 minute every day before I fully committed to your program, that made a difference immediately with an injury I've had for a couple of years. Anyways, so another injury I've had that would take me out for weeks is Achilles tendonitis. I know that's also really common with all sports, really. Tennis, basketball, definitely in cross country and whatnot. So I've had it twice on my left side in high school, and then once on my right side during college. And the frustrating thing about Achilles tendonitis is you can take a full week off, and you'll think you're good to go. And there's many times where I'd go back out running, and it was as if I never took any rest at all. So that would lead to another week off, and then eventually it's been 3, 4, 5 weeks. And if you didn't have access to a physical therapist or someone that can help you with that issue, just kind of putting a Band-Aid fix on it, then you were just going to keep suffering with it until you can find out the root, which was really hard to do. You just want to focus on being an athlete. You don't want to have to turn into your own athletic trainer. But unfortunately, I did spend a lot of time in college combating all these different injuries all this wealth of information I've had on the mainstream way of addressing these injuries was basically what I was spending my time doing instead of focusing on performing better and just enjoying it, of course. So another really common one is IT band syndrome, and I had this at least 10 times, although it didn't really last very long when I did have it. But I remember whenever I did have it, or if I saw a teammate have it, I would tell them, okay, here are the stretches you need to do. So anytime I ever felt it coming along, I would just do these simple stretches, and it wouldn't fix. That led to a lot of frustration that, I thought I knew how to handle it, but it And I guess now I'll talk about the more serious injuries that weren't from overuse. Usually when I had an injury, it was just annoying. Like I mentioned, it was overused, but it was really nothing serious. But later on into my collegiate career, I've had some pretty bad injuries. I pulled my left hip flexor during my indoor season of sophomore year. And that was 8 weeks of inconsistent training. Honestly, I think everyone knows me as like probably the tightest person on the team. You just, I can't touch my toes. I can't do any of those things. And I think I was doing a lunge and that's it. I was age 20. I did a lunge and I already pulled a muscle. And I was figuring out how did that happen. But anyway, that wasn't the first muscle I pulled. I actually had a minor hamstring injury towards the end of my indoor season, junior year of college, which negatively affected my outdoor season too. At this point, I was doing your training, but I wasn't consistent with it. I didn't know exactly what plan to follow. I was just doing the hop. I wasn't doing it consistently. I did notice that my shin issues have been resolved, but I guess I just became too overconfident and to think that I really needed to go any further, that I was just going to focus on the running again. I got the injuries done. And, but anyway, before I go into that, I also did recall my calves and quads were always tight and I just lived with it. I just accepted it. Outside of sports too, I suffered from tension headaches all the time and tight upper back muscles. I don't have the best posture when I sit in maybe class or if I'm just sitting down, but that I just kind of accepted it. I didn't make a big deal about it. I did notice it though. Also, occasionally when I did put my racing spikes on, my left foot always had the sensation of plantar fasciitis, but I don't think I really had it that bad. I know in the athletic trainer's room, they have you do marble pickups. They have you do the towel curls, but they don't do it in the way that you have taught me to do it, or I see that your program has us doing it. There's no applying tension. There's no heel off the ground. You can get really sloppy with the technique because people think that in order to have an arc in your foot, it needs to physically be there. So automatically I look like someone that is flat-footed simply because my foot is completely flat on the ground. Right. And I do have friends that they do have this arc in their foot, but they have a lot of injuries. Just because they have that physical-looking arc in their feet doesn't mean that they have a strong arc. And that was kind of a breakthrough for me. Actually, if you had told me that 3-4 years ago, I said, that doesn't make sense. I mean, what are you talking? Is there some sort of inner arc? And that's kind of what you've proven. So anyway, with all that being said, my goal went from running faster to just combating these injuries, which was really physically and mentally exhausting, spending that much time as a student athlete just thinking about how I'm going to fix these injuries rather than how am I going to perform, there's a bunch of racing tactics you have to think about too if you're in a championship meet and whatnot. And I was just constantly looking for an answer or some sort of relief. And that was really, I was focusing on performing better. So It was almost like I was this subject matter expert about running injuries, yet I still had these pesky injuries and had them as often as the next runner. I could tell you about all these injuries and the mainstream way of addressing and preventing them, yet I'm the one that's always injured and wondering how come all this stuff I'm doing isn't providing any sort of relief. So in terms of physical therapists and doctors, I can list some of those that I've seen. I've actually, even before that, I think when in high school when I did have Achilles tendonitis, I remember a person referred me to a shoe fitting store or just a running shoe store or whatever you call it. And it took them 3 seconds right away to just say, hey, you're flat-footed. Here are some supportive shoes. And it almost seemed like a gimmick. I wouldn't really have considered, I wouldn't have walked in with any negative intentions. I'm going there to shop for shoes, and I didn't really think there was anything more than just choosing a pair that you like. But they started throwing all these terms at me, and it's become a norm in the running world to hear that. You need motion control shoes, you need stability shoes, you overpronate, you supinate. All these terms are like common vocabulary sometimes with athletes. And basically I left this store, I spent $120 on these shoes. They look like boats, and it made my Achilles tendonitis a lot worse. Right. And I just didn't, just even experiencing it, there's no way you can put on those shoes, these big bulky shoes, and just say, hey, this is going to work a week or two from now. I'm never going to have Achilles tendonitis again. This should fix everything. It just didn't feel comfortable to begin with. So for someone at the shoe fitting store to say, hey, here, here are these shoes and whatnot, and for me to say, yeah, absolutely, like, let me throw that amount of money at it and think all is well, it was just frustrating. So later on, I would go to see a chiropractor, and he sort of helped. It's nice because, chiropractors do a lot of unique things, and I was paying out of pocket. So he would always say, you need to come back for more appointments to fix this issue. And of course, when you're running, there's always going to be an issue. You're always going to need maintenance. So eventually I couldn't see him anymore. And then I think I've seen an orthopedic specialist, and I remember the person working with me did this, they were trying to tell me the difference between running with your quad and your hamstring. And then she started showing me different ways of running, and she went into this scrunched up position. It was a really odd looking running form. And she said, this is how you would compensate for, I guess, whatever pain you're having here. And then she was heel stomping and doing all that stuff. All stuff I was aware of, just because I guess when you're a runner, sometimes you are conscious about your form and stuff, especially the way your foot lands on the ground.
Right.
I know a lot of people don't make a big deal about it. A lot of people say, hey, I heel strike, that's totally fine. And a lot of people make it their job to be recognized for landing on their toes. I think I land more midfoot, but I did notice when she showed me that, I was like, how is that going to fix my Achilles tendonitis? But obviously, she was the expert. So I said, okay, let me give it a shot. Let me change up my form again. And I guess at that point, that's when I started to realize that everything that's being thrown at me is just more or less an opinion, and that it's not going to really suit me if I don't really find out what's really the issue. And that's what led to kind of years of just looking into running form and all these extensive routines on all sorts of things that was kind of just distracting me from just being an athlete and enjoying it. Then eventually I did see a physical therapist. I went to a great one near me, but I must have checked in with them every time I came home from college break, because that's when I would get some sort of injury. So it's like, hey, welcome back, and it was great. They're definitely great people over there, but it was just frustrating having to show up there every time for
Right.
a nagging injury. I understand if you pull your hamstring and you need to get worked on, of course, but to kind of have shin issues again and having to go the length to just see a physical therapist, and maybe after 3 to 4 visits you're fine, and you think, okay, here we go, and only for the next couple months come back with the same thing. It was just frustrating over and over. So, and I think the most baffling one was, it's accepted that you need to get some sort of orthotics if you need to correct your feet. Even if you have some arc in your, or whatever, you need to see a podiatrist. They can definitely give you these custom orthotics, and all your problems will be solved. So I started realizing the body's connected. I realized that, your pelvis can be misaligned, your knees can be what's the term, valgus?
Yeah, knee valgus. Mm-hmm.
Right. I started to notice the ankle. Oh, by the way, the ankle was said to be something that's supposed to have mobility. So they said the knee is supposed to be mobile, the ankle's supposed to be. So yeah, I believed all that. It looked like it was a pattern, and I said, okay, that's that seems correct, I guess. And I'm just an athlete. I don't really know any better, but from everything I was reading, I was like, yeah, that's I guess what seems consistent. And I went through the entire process of getting orthotics. That's a long one, and luckily my insurance covered it. That could have been $400 out of pocket, but I didn't have to pay anything. What was frustrating was waiting weeks for it, and then ultimately not using them after a few months because I was still injured with them. I don't know, maybe they did tell me, not all your injuries will be totally addressed, or maybe it's just a relief. And then another thing too that really drew back to the whole everything's an opinion is you can go on YouTube and say orthotics aren't supposed to be a permanent thing. They're almost essentially a crutch.
Yes.
And I was confused because the podiatrist said, wear this when you're walking around. My coach would say, of course, that's supposed to be in your shoe when you're doing any sort of training or, at practice. Now, when you're racing, you're fine. But if you're training and doing practice sessions, definitely put that in your shoes and you should be good to go. But it didn't take long for me to just say, these things are really annoying. So I just took them out. And of course, just being a student athlete, I was just constantly in the athletic trainer room. And sometimes it was almost like I was going in there for fun. And the amount of times I would just blindly walk in and say, yeah, this hurts today. But anyway, I guess I'll talk about the things I've done to address it on my own behalf. I don't really like taking a lot of anti-inflammatories because I feel like that's masking the pain.
Right.
But, whenever I did have to, maybe if it was Achilles tendonitis and I couldn't determine if I had to ice or heat it and the entire routine, and obviously you hear terms like the rice method, I would take it if it got out of hand, of course. And then I guess another masking thing to do is applying Tiger Balm, which something funny on the side is you always smell that. When you go onto the line for a cross-country meet, someone's always putting Tiger Balm on. It always makes everyone's eyes water, and it's just kind of really a nostalgic smell of cross-country meets. It's kind of funny.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Someone's always wearing Tiger Balm. It's almost as if it's like a perfume or something. I don't know. That's just from my perspective, of course. But from what I've noticed, you're nervous, you're on the line, and you're smelling something really potent coming from the guy next to you. So it was always something I remembered from high school and college meets too. And of course, like every runner is going to have, even the professionals, you have a stretch strap. You always warm up and you'll get on the ground and you'll do these long routines just to warm up. And there's all sorts of rope stretches you can do. And sometimes it just feels good. But sometimes I would do these long routines. I would make it, instead of just a habit, it was like I was forcing myself to do all these stretch routines. I was stretching my hamstrings with the stretch rope. And then as soon as I'm done, my lower back would hurt me. And that's kind of rare for me. I rarely have lower back pain, even from running, or maybe if I slept wrong or something. I rarely have that. But I did know the hamstrings and the lower back are connected. So I kind of knew why I was getting the lower back pain, but I just wanted to make sure my hamstrings weren't super tight. So I was doing these long routines and I wasn't really getting anywhere either. And of course, I have a lot of different things you can roll out with. I always use a lacrosse ball. So I guess that was something that I knew to do, roll out your feet with a lacrosse ball. That just felt nice. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, of course, except for just rolling out. And I had a foam roller and one of those massage guns that are kind of the new fad now with runners and athletic trainers. I use compression socks, sometimes socks with padding on the soles. They would just market them as arch support. And that's actually the last time I wore compression socks. I was just doing one of my long runs over the summer during day season. And I just got this excruciating pain a couple minutes into my run. It was my shins, the inner shin. And I stopped wearing compression socks after that. But I thought the reason why I'm wearing compression socks is to combat that issue. Yet I was right there with the pain and everything. And then I guess another thing too I got my hands on, this also has like a lot of opinions out there. It's KP tape. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And there's this entire guide on there's a PDF file that I'm reading through all these YouTube videos, how to apply it. And it was so many times where I just would not apply it correctly and I would just have to take it off, waste another one. And then I think the times I did get it right, I'm like, this isn't doing anything for me. It's not doing anything for my Achilles tendonitis. And I guess, for some people it works. It's nice to have it. I don't know if it's placebo. I know for other people that it seems to do the job if they're racing. But for me, my experience with it, it did not work for me. And it also, I kind of got out of hand here and I bought myself, are you familiar with Graston technique?
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like a butter knife. But I ended up buying one of those. And I guess when you're always getting some sort of sports massage, or if you're getting this done, I know it's more of a neurological thing, Graston. I think that's what the technique's about, or so I was told. You're always hearing the term break up fascia, as if fascia is a bad thing. And I always thought fascia was a bad thing. I would have never thought that you need to exercise, or if that's the correct term, exercise your fascia, right?
Yeah, you want to put fascial tension into your body so that they become a fully responsive system.
Right. And I'm using this Graston blade, which really, you should only leave that to the professionals to use. But I was definitely desperate on fixing these shin issues I was having, that I had my own set of Graston blades to use at home. And it was it gave me relief when I was done at practice, but the next day I would go run and then finish, and then it was just sore. Anyway, I think what did work temporarily was I ended up just getting these gel pads off of their heel cups off of Amazon. And it was amazing because, like, in the midst of all those injuries and stuff, or especially the shin injuries, it immediately cured it. And I haven't had anything like that since the hyper arc, which is obviously more of a natural approach instead of having to rely on some sort of thing to put in your shoe. The hop for me did it a lot better than putting these heel cups in, but the heel cups did work. They weren't always reliable, but I was definitely surprised to see that just doing the hyper arc hop alone gave me that same result as when I just used some gel pads that would wear out, and then I would have to spend more money to get it. They weren't custom, but I've had my own experience with custom orthotics, and it just wasn't for me. So I've definitely done a lot of reading, and this is just something you do when you have so many injuries. If you're an athlete or even a coach, you're always trying to figure out, okay, how are you going to address this? So it started off very simple for me. I would just see, okay, how do you treat a foot sprain? Okay, ice it. And eventually, just over the years and dealing with more nagging injuries, and to the point where it was just hindering my performance and stuff, you start buying all these books, and I had like an entire collection going. And the crazy part was I wasn't even finishing the book because one book would contradict what I read in the other book, and then it was just an entire mess. I was having all these books on my shelf collecting dust. I just lost interest. If I would spend money on a book to read on their routine, and I guess 2 chapters in, I'm saying, okay, this is not a good program, I guess. I mean, who am I to judge except for just my own personal experience? But I just didn't like how one book would say, okay, practice. I guess an example would be target these muscles and work on them, and this will give you better running mechanics. And then the other book would say, instead of focusing on that, you should be focusing on, say, the deep core muscles and stuff. And it just too many things to focus on. I didn't want to have to make my own routine based off of multiple sources. Now I'm spending so much time it was awful. Anyway,
it's very confusing.
I guess reading, definitely very confusing. There was definitely a few books that touched on the glutes. They said, yeah, the glutes are essential. They did not mention anything about fascia. They didn't mention anything about the feet or applying tension. And of course, if you just read more into the book, there's probably some sort of routine that says, okay, we're going to work on dorsiflexion. That's also essential. So spending a great deal of time reading that, I've learned about the terms and just what anterior or posterior pelvic tilt was. Because all these glute exercises I was doing, they weren't really working. So I did take a look at my pelvis now, because I figured, okay, maybe the reason why my hamstrings are tight and my quads are, I wouldn't say lengthened, or I don't want to get into those terminologies, but I figured, okay, maybe I have some sort of anterior pelvic tilt. That's probably common amongst a lot of people anyway. So I started doing these exercises that would bring me into a more posterior pelvic tilt, because you don't want to go too much into that. You just want to get into like a neutral range.
Right.
And so now I'm making up all these, really weird and long routines, and quite frankly unnecessary. But at the time, this is what you're doing when you're injured for weeks and you're trying to figure out how to get back into your just a regular practice session. And mind you, when you miss even a couple days of just in any sport, you're immediately desperate. You want to get right back into your routine. And running specifically, you'll have a meet every week or maybe every other week, and if you miss the day where you're supposed to do a workout, you're immediately thinking of the race and the time you're missing and the work that's kind of gone. So when this happens to you for years, you're just very desperate and whatnot. But anyway, so I was spending a lot of time addressing the whole anterior, posterior pelvic tilt. And I guess for a year, I was doing all these exercises that would target the glutes and I guess lengthen the hip flexors. That was always a combination. And then after a year, I started thinking, maybe I had it all wrong. Maybe I have a posterior pelvic tilt. I couldn't really tell. I was diagnosing myself, which you shouldn't do, but that's what I was doing. And it started off as just either or. It's either you have anterior or you have posterior. And then just digging even deeper on YouTube, you're starting to see there's a lot of people that say you can have a combination of both. And that's where I lost my mind. I was like hearing different opinions on, you can have a combination of this. There's 6 different postures out there, and now I'm balancing this. Now I'm not even thinking about just doing a core routine anymore. Now I'm really deep into lengthening hip flexors and my psoas and all these terms being thrown around. And now I have a combination of, now, you know, a lot of people associate running with just your core, maybe your legs, right? You need your quads to run. Maybe your knee drive, it's because of your quads, and your hamstrings are essential and whatnot, without really knowing what they're supposed to actually be doing, and that the glutes are supposed to take a role. But the fact that I was now thinking about my thoracic spine and I'm just a distance runner, and I'm thinking of ways of loosening up my thoracic spine so that I can just run with my arms. And that's when I knew that I'm just way off. I'm like away from the answer. And I was like, this is too much. But I kept going because I was still injured. I was still having these nagging injuries. And yeah, so like I said, it was a combination of both. And this led into just me doing these really weird posture exercises. It looked like a lot of yoga related. I'm not really sure how to describe these, but it involved me going out, buying like a yoga mat, and which is fine, and a yoga block, and then doing these different exercises and stretching my neck muscles just to run. And that's when I had to put a stop to it. I said, okay, you know what, if I'm just going to be injured at practice, I'm just going to focus on running, because at that point I stopped having fun. I realized that's important when you're an athlete too. Mm-hmm. There's an entire different mental aspect, of course, to your sport. And especially in running too, you always hear it's 80% mental, 20% physical and whatnot. That's a term you'll find on the back of someone's shirt. But, my goal with all these routines was just to be injury free. I figured if I was injury free, then the performance would come right after. And I think the last thing I started doing before I saw your channel was realizing that the brain has a role in activating your glutes. So now I'm familiarizing myself with glute activation. So they're saying, oh, those glute workouts aren't working because you need to activate it. So I said, oh, of course. So now I'm sitting in a chair and I'm basically forcing myself to contract them, which is pretty hard to do, of course, because the muscles are lengthened. But it seemed to have worked. It seemed to be the answer for a couple of days. The feet were not involved, but that's why it probably lasts a couple of days. I thought I was onto something, and from there, I could have not thought of anything else to do to help or get my glutes going. And then, of course, I saw your program. It took me a few months to reach out to you, but because it was just hard balancing everything I was doing, and I wanted to see how far I can get just off your YouTube videos and stuff. But I guess, I started realizing a lot of important things, different opinions from other people. Running can be very simple. So sometimes if I scratch the surface with any of the information I found, it almost looked like I came off crazy. No one wants to show up to practice and say, hey, I'm not doing so well because of my anterior pelvic tilt. That's just, no one wants to hear that.
Right.
And, of course, a lot of the information I was reading, it's not mainstream. So you would figure, okay, as soon as you're done doing your long run or a workout of some sort, just do some core, get some water and stretch, use your rope to do all those stretchings. And for some people that works, and, injuries are just a fact of life for them. And that's it, and however good they will be in their sport that's their peak, their plateau, or whatever you want to call it. But I guess I would see teammates make the same mistakes that I would do in the past, go out and buy all these gadgets to aid in injuries that wouldn't really fix them 100%. And just because I had that experience, I already knew what was going on, but for some reason I couldn't fix it on my own end. And speaking of opinions from other people too, hearing that ankle mobility, the dorsiflexion, that's important. And I'm hearing that being thrown around.
Yeah, for sure. That has been thrown in the mainstream training for a long time, but we are doing exactly the opposite.
Sure. And I guess the last opinion too, and this one's definitely huge in the running community, is the type of shoe you wear. I guess in high school, without thinking about it. You go to Kohl's, you pick off whatever sneaker on the, unless you really knew what you were doing, then you go to a running store. And I've had an experience with one running store. Other than that, I would just choose any brand that I thought was cool and wear the shoe until it was just old. And in that case, that could be Nike or New Balance. That's one of my personal favorites. I wore Asics a lot in college. I wore Mizuno because I figured, that's not really a brand a lot of people talk about. And then, of course, one of the new popular brands is Hoka's, which are really supportive. They're sleek. But for me personally, when I wore them for the first time, I felt like it really messed up my running gait. And it really didn't help a lot. For me, it felt odd. I know it's an adjustment, but I remember showing up to college one time wearing these, they referred to them as trainer flats or road racing flats. And a lot of people are like, yeah, those shoes aren't supportive at all. You're going to get injured. Ironically, wearing those shoes, I wasn't getting injured at all. Or at least if I was getting some sort of injury, it was maybe just an irritation of some sort. But as long as I wore them for a few months, and of course, when they're worn out, you want to get new shoes, then it was fine. But in college, you wear those only to work out. So I wore more supportive training shoes. I made sure to get the fancy ones for stability so you don't pronate and all that. And it really didn't do it for me. So that was kind of like the last thing that I knew that was circulating around, that you need to have these shoes that fit properly. And, you have to do this entire routine, stretching, and you have to do all these mobility exercises, but definitely nothing with the feet. And so it was, when I did see your program, I was like, this is very unique.
Very simple too, right? My program is incredibly simple. If you understand how the foot is supposed to work, lock up your ankle. We have 5 or 6 core exercises that we focus on. There's not gazillion exercises you're doing. And every day we spend 5 to 10 minutes, right? And we meet once a week for 12 weeks. And that's it.
And that was actually towards, unfortunately, my season got canceled. All of our seasons got canceled during, right into the outdoor portion of the spring semester. Right. And that's when I was working on you. I kind of accepted at that point that the work I was doing with you wasn't just going to contribute to my final seasons as a collegiate runner. I was just, seems like something that for life. I know you said many times that, you do it once. It's not like muscles where you have to maintain it. And of course, you want to spend a great deal of time implementing this in your routine before you just say, okay, I don't need to do this routine as often or as long. But definitely. And the 12 weeks working with you, there was a noticeable change. And the first step for me was just doing the hyper arc hop by myself and noticing, hey, look, these shin injuries I was having for a couple years are gone. That's definitely a good sign. And now when I go out to run today, just for fun, not really training for anything in particular, but it's just nice to feel something different. It's nice to not feel super sore all the time or feel like your hamstrings are too tight. It's just nice to feel that the hip area. And like I said, I'm still in between stage 2 or stage 3, as you put it. So my glutes don't fully contract, but I do feel the benefits of just kind of effortless running.
Yes.
So I'm just surprised to see what it's going to be like when I finally get stage 3. And then, of course, once the core is implemented too, that's just going to be entirely a different game.
Right.
And I mentioned before, even outside of sports, I have probably a lot of posture issues that probably the reason why I have a lot of these tension headaches and stuff. So I do a lot of sitting down for my job. So I'm surprised maybe that will help with that. Maybe I'll sit up more straight and it's just a cool thing to have, to be able to consciously activate the glutes just using your feet. That's just unique. No one really has that anymore just because of the shoe. Exactly. I remember one of my coaches, something kind of odd, but it was kind of something I would understand just after your program. He said, I think the reason why a lot of people are just getting injured these days is because of the shoe. And I know a lot of other people would say, well, what are you supposed to do, barefoot running? And I wasn't a fan of that. I feel like that's kind of painful for me to go around and start running barefoot. When he said that, I knew exactly what he's talking about. I mean, I'm pretty sure he doesn't know what the hyperarch was, but I knew he was onto something. And I know from what I know from you, that's a reason why. Yeah.
Yeah, gradual loss of fascial tension in the foot over time causes a lot of running problem, causes a lot of movement problem. So this is this is why a lot of people they try to teach the form, but the form can be 100% correct, but the athlete's not getting results and the athlete's getting injured because what's happening inside, it really needs to be corrected from inside, right? So it's like the
Right.
Elon Musk's rocket. Before Elon Musk, we just waste millions of dollars launching a rocket into space, and then that rocket will just poof, gone. Now Elon Musk says, okay, let me bring the rocket down, but he's not changing the rocket shape. It's not from the outside. He's changing the software inside the rocket, right? It's a
Right.
circuitry. It's the software. So the rocket goes up to space, and then you can come back and land, saving millions of dollars. So I think this is the same approach that we need to apply to sports. We are in the, I guess for the last decade we so focus on the form, which is the outside of the rocket, right? What paint do we have on the rocket, right? Where do you have its windows? This type of thing, right? Where should
Right.
it have its wings? But instead of focusing on that, you should really focus on the inside, because the inside is what makes things tick, really.
That's right. Yeah, we were speaking about basically mimicking form. That's what a lot of runners do, actually. You know, you see the professionals running a certain way, and you want to look just like that too. And just being fast, of course. But I guess the two most popular things to always force on your form, I guess, or is the foot strike and your arm swing. Those are the two things that a lot of people, well, actually, more of the arm swing. The arm swing you can easily get made fun of, or if you're running around and your arms are crossing and whatnot. And then I guess foot strike is when maybe someone that's really good and they're looking at someone that's not so good. They say, hey, maybe you need to stop heel striking, and that becomes a huge debate on the team. Some people say, hey, I do it and I'm fine, and others say, okay, you're really missing out and stuff. But there are probably a lot of runners that are probably conscious about that arm swing and foot strike. And I noticed just doing your program for a couple weeks, my arms naturally, just with my posture and everything, and not utilizing all of my glutes yet, it still crosses across my chest, which is fine for me for now. But I noticed when I'm in a practice session and I do feel my glutes more than I usually do, I notice it's like my arms lock into more of a steady, it's like I'm using the full arm swing and they're not crossing each other anymore. And that's probably the most surprising thing I've felt too.
Mm.
To think that, okay, now I can feel my glutes. What does my arms have to do with that? And to think everything's connected too. And of course, when you're doing the hyper arc hop, not just the hop, I'm sorry, when you're using it, when you're training, when any sports, especially running, which is in every sport somehow, yeah, there's, you need to land on the ball of your feet. So that's definitely essential too. But a lot of people that recommend that to other teammates to say, oh, you should land on your toes, and they'll do that without applying the proper tension or doing the proper exercises, and then they'll notice it. It's really fatiguing, and they'll have injuries actually as a result of it. So now when you tell
Yes.
someone, hey, you should be not heel striking, as soon as they stop heel striking, now they're getting injured. And it's like, well, you told me not to do that. Now I got injured. And that's actually the result of just mimicking form. When you mimic form, it will have negative consequences. So yeah, I definitely do agree with when you say that. Yeah, of course you should be working from the inside and doing the proper exercises so that it's just a natural thing that you do. Of course, it was always natural until I guess the shoe messed that up for us.
Yeah, the shoe is the
Uh,
it's the culprit. And but I
right.
think the biggest problem is that there is a entire industry of people that depends on the shoe. And again, there's an entire industry of people that depends on you coming back. Because my goal is really for people to understand that, okay, there is a missing mechanism in the foot. You need to apply fascial tension. You build up the fascial tension from the feet to the glutes, build up the fascial connection from the feet to the abs. Then you don't have to see me ever again. And you will become a great athlete with very low risk of injury. This is my goal. Because my goal is not to see you over again. Only maybe when you treat me for dinner. But other than that, I want to be able to give you the knowledge so you can use it for a lifetime. This is my goal.
Definitely, and I don't have it all the way. I'm not stage 3 or even stage 4 yet, and I immediately felt just the results of relieving my shin pain. That was a huge deal for me. Unfortunately, I didn't get to reap the benefits of the performance aspect of just having the hyper arc. But definitely for injury, that was something that made me appreciate that and made me enjoy running, even though I was still dealing with injuries here and there, of course, because I wasn't fully, I didn't implement it fully into my routine. It's just nice to see that you don't even have it all the way and you still have these benefits.
Right, because it's a gradual process. Changes never happen in one day. But I'm really glad that you can come on and talk to me about your unique experience, because I don't think anyone has read more material and tried more things than you.